Hey everyone, quick video from my hotel room in Tokyo to talk about the newly announced Canon 5DS-R. Now there's been heaps of chatter about these for weeks or months. I get people messaging me every day saying, what do you think of the rumor? And to be honest, I don't follow the rumors, but now that it's out, I'm happy to have a chat about it. Now, when something like this comes out, now the big thing about the 5DS is that it's 50.6 megapixel, a huge resolution new sensor. When this kind of thing happens, two or three things always tend to happen, or whenever there's a big discussion about new generation of camera technology. First, you'll have the people who just come out with the, oh, it's not the gear that makes the shot, it's the people that make the shot, and we don't need this, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. All true, who cares? People still use the latest generation equipment, the technology is getting better. Cameras in one sense are a feat of engineering. Of course, the most important thing is your eye, but a big part of modern digital cameras is technology, and technology is developing, and what they're able to do for us and what it opens up to us as business people and as artists is improving. So yes, you're right, but also who cares? Second thing is you'll have a lot of people coming out saying 50.6 megapixel is ridiculous for storage reasons, computing reasons, actual usage reasons, do we need it reasons. Couple of things on that. Well, first of all, the same was said when the D800 came out from Nikon. 36 megapixels, this is unprecedented, it's ridiculous, no one needs it, no one will use it, and it's been an absolute hit. I'm currently filming on the D810, and they're just fantastic. Now, the 810 and the 800 also have astounding dynamic range. Canons aren't famous for that, but we'll see how they go with that. But, you know, the discussion about do you need the resolution? When the first medium format digital cameras came out for $40,000 and $50,000 with a 5 megapixel back, people thought it was overkill. When I got my first 2 megapixel point and shoot that interpolated up to 3 megapixel, people thought it was unnecessary, and with the cost of storage cards, it was going to be, you know, a waste of time because it only fit 50 or 100 shots per card. And then 12, and then 16, and then 24, and then 36, and now 50. It keeps going up. I said this a year or two ago, and I mean it. Before long, we'll have 100 megapixel cameras with 1 million ISO as kind of a standard. It'll happen by 2020, mark my words. It's just happening, so bolt yourself in for the ride. And the third one that I find really interesting, because it happens with people through all parts of the market, whether they're reviewers or photographers or, you know, armchair commentators, is who's this camera for? And really, who cares? You should be just asking, is it for me? I find it really interesting that people like to compartmentalize photographers into, well, you've got sports shooters, and sports shooters as a category need 10 frames a second and tracking and this and this and this. And studio photographers are just shooting people, and they don't need tracking, and they only need one focus point, and they're going to be on a tripod. And then you've got this kind of photographer. It's just nonsense. Nobody fits so discreetly into one category. The D810 was going to be just a studio camera. People use them outdoors all the time. It's really not a big deal, especially considering this new Canon has some technology built in to help with some of the potential downsides or challenges that such a big resolution brings with it. So I just wanted to clear those things first, because so much of the discussion gets taken up on those 3 points, which are just total misnomers and divert you away from looking at what does the camera offer, and does it, you know, offer value to you and the way that you want to shoot. Alright, let's take a look at some of the specs. This guy's got 61-point focus system. I haven't seen the layout, but I'm assuming it's going to be well distributed throughout the screen, and 41 of those are going to be cross-type. You know, saying cross-type is like saying turbocharged. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be fantastic, but generally cross-type sensors have a greater ability to track and to pick up detail. They're generally on cheaper cameras, you'll have fewer of them, and they're right in the middle. With 41, they should be fairly well distributed around the screen, which should help with your focus, whatever you're shooting in. Whether you're shooting on tripod, in using a single point, to be able to put it right out in a corner is handy. If you are tracking things, then why not? And I know people will say the 5DS is not a sports camera. If you shoot sports with it, it's a sports camera, okay? It's, you know, just look at the specs and is it going to work for you? Okay, I'm sure you've heard people talking a lot about the different, you know, top-line specs, but let me just run through what I think some of the more interesting ones. So it has a built-in intervalometer, built-in bulb timer, so, you know, you don't need to buy the external remote control. Something really cool, this one has a mirror control mechanism to reduce vibration. And I haven't found it personally, but a lot of people found that shooting with the D800 and D810, they had to really increase their shutter speed to get rid of any hand wobble. So with 50 megapixel, the potential for that is even greater. So if there's a way of minimizing the vibration from the shutter, that could definitely be a help in getting pin sharp images. Okay, 1.3 and 1.6 crop factor. Again, the Nikons have had that option for a little while. If it comes with a higher frame rate, then I think there definitely would be options for that. And again, people say, who needs that? It's $4,000. This is for pro shooters. This is for people shooting in studio, yada, yada, yada. But there's people from all different walks of life out there. People who are just stepping up from DX and have been waiting for a megapixel monster, who want the option to be able to use their smaller, their crop sensor lenses on it, and be able to get that extra reach, especially if it comes with the benefit of a higher frame rate. Okay, a lot of people talking about this isn't a video camera, it's not a replacement to the 5D Mark III. Well, there's nothing to say that the video won't be just as lovely as the 5D Mark III, but the fact that it hasn't got a headphone port kind of strongly signals that they're not meaning this to be a serious video shooter, in the same that the Canon 1DX didn't have a headphone port. It's still got mic in though, so I'm sure you'll be able to, and if you're doing serious video production, you're probably going to be using external audio and you'll be monitoring it externally anyway. Interesting that they say that the Intelligent Viewfinder 2 has approximately 100% coverage. Why throw in the word approximately? That must mean that it's slightly below 100% viewfinder coverage. Quite interesting on a $3,500–4,000 body. One thing I missed at the start. So the R is basically the S, just it has the anti-aliasing filter cancelled. It's not that it doesn't have one. So same with the Nikon, when the D800 came out, they had the 800 and the E. The E just had the filter cancelled, whereas the D810 doesn't have the filter at all, and it's getting even better results. So, there'll be people saying you don't need it, and Nikon learnt the lesson that you just go without it. But the D800 was a big seller, and people were a little bit afraid of getting the moire, but it wasn't really an issue in most shooting situations. Okay, one thing that I'm surprised hasn't improved across camera manufacturers is the rear screen. It's still a 3.2 inch, just over 1 million pixels. It says it's got a 170-degree viewing angle, but it's not a tilty, swivelly one, which is kind of standard in that higher range where they don't have a pop-up flash. They also don't have a swivelly screen. I think across all of the manufacturers pretty much, except for maybe Sony. Interesting thing in the picture styles, if you're shooting in JPEG or something other than RAW, it's got a new fine detail mode, which actually reduces all the sharpening and all of those things to really help you capture as much of the fine detail and gradation without applying those things which can tend to, by sharpening things, you start to put in jagged edges onto things rather than letting that soft transition. Interesting. Another interesting one, it's got an anti-flicker feature that will be able to check when the lights are cycling to take the shot in between the flicker. Can really make a difference. I'd love to see, and this would require huge computing power, but depending on the frequency of the flicker, if they could do that in 24 frames a second video to be able to capture the video frames in that, in between the flickers, that would be astonishing. But for stills, could certainly still be handy if you're shooting indoor events. The video stats are pretty much what you'd expect, full HD in all the normal formats. No 4K on this one. Again, 4K is the other one people like to go on about with resolution. No one really needs it. There are times where, for certain shooters, the ability to crop or to just go huge is really, really helpful, and more information is useful for someone like me as well. But something that I find really interesting is, at 50.6 megapixel, how will the lenses stand up to it? I'm using the Zeiss Otis lenses, and they're resolving close to 36 megapixel of the D800. But that's a fair way off 50 megapixels, so I don't know if there's any lens out there that's really going to do it justice. You still will get more information out with 50 megapixel than, say, a 36 or a 24, even with the same lens, but you're not going to be really taking advantage of what that has to offer you. The interesting thing, though, is we really are now entering medium format territory. You know, the digital back for the Hasselblad series of cameras, they're a 50 megapixel back, and you're looking at $15,000 to $20,000 for that. Whereas this is coming in at $3,500 to $4,000. Not cheap, but when you look at what the D810 and the 5D Mark III came in at originally, they do come down a little, but still it's ratcheting up in price every time around. That's just how the consumer system works, I guess. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Of course, there is the new zoom lens coming in as well, going all the way down to 11mm on the wide end. That's pretty incredible. Only an f4 and astonishingly expensive. I think it's like $3,000. Crazy money. And once you put the Australia and UK tax onto those things, they're going to be looking even more out of the realm of most people. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave me any questions or comments if you think that the features that this one offers are for you. And don't be afraid of being shouted down by the vocal few who just want to shoot everything down as being unnecessary. For more new gear news and reviews, check out macgranger.com. You can also check out my different download series and sign up for the mailing list to keep up to date with all the new material. Cheers, and thanks for watching.